Hi, welcome back for another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. I'm flying solo today. Don't have my co-pilot Jacqueline with me. Today we're going to focus on a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. If she was here with me, she would completely concur. And that is using the terminology of addiction versus using the terminology of abuse. Why it matters and what should we use? So here's the issue. When a person has compulsive sexual behavior, when they have sexual integrity issues, we tend to, more often than not, call that dynamic sex addiction. And it could be highly debated whether it is sex addiction or not. The constructs for that, the measurement for that, the tools used to diagnose that are very obscure, very inconsistent, not even recognized by a lot of the psychological literature. So it could be debated as to whether this person is a quote unquote sex addict or not. But if they are in an intimate partner relationship, there's one thing that is not debatable at all. And that is, this is abuse. This person may or may not have a sex addiction. That could be discussed. But what is definitive is that there is abuse. Well, what does it really matter what we call them? It matters because if we use the term sex addict or addiction and we use that term alone, and there's no mention of abuse, there is this downstream effect that takes place that could actually make things even more difficult in many ways for the betrayed partner. And so words matter. Terminology matters, and we're advocates for using both words in conjunction. That if there is an intimate partnership going on, then and if there is any kind of compulsive sexual behavior, if there is deceptive sexuality in the midst of a intimate relationship, then there is automatically, without a doubt, abuse happening. And when we ignore using the term abuse and only focus on the term addiction, here's the problem. We don't just ignore the term abuse. We ignore something else, the victim. Anytime there is abuse, there is a victim. And when we only use the word addiction, we're shifting the focus towards the perpetrator of the abuse rather than the victim of the abuse. Well, let's pause here and talk about what exactly is abuse. If we get down to the etymology of the word and its origin, it's originally a Latin word, abusus or abusus, and it literally means to misuse, to abuse, to misuse, to treat improperly, to use wrongly, to treat with cruelty is another definition, to misapply, to misappropriate. So when you look at it that way, it could be argued that yes, this is abuse. I remember the very first time that I came across this notion that I was not only someone who perpetrated in compulsive sexuality and deceptive sexuality, but that by nature, because I was in an intimate relationship, I had participated in abuse. And I remember having a visceral, knee-jerk reaction to this thought. I have never laid an angry hand on any woman ever in my life, especially my partner. So how could you dare even suggest that I'm an abuser? Because I had this stereotype in my mind that an abuser is middle-aged, balding, overweight, probably drunk, unemployed, disheveled, unkept, unshaven, in a wife beater shirt, and he beats his wife. That's an abuser. I'm not that guy. And how could you even associate me with that guy? And so that was the stereotype that was in my mind. But as I delved a little bit deeper into, well, what does the word abuse mean? It means to misuse, to treat harshly, to cause harm. What if we just replaced it with the word harm? Have you caused harm? I had to admit that not only by my deceptive sexuality, but by my lying, by my gaslighting, by my crazy making, by my blame shifting, by all of these abusive tactics that I use to try and cover the deceptive sexuality and to protect that secret, that I was most definitely involved in abuse. It was a profound misuse of the trust of my partner, and it was a significant act of cruelty. And that was a very critical step in my own recovery journey to realize that my deceptive sexuality is not a problem in and of itself, but it is a two-pronged problem. There was this compulsive sexual behavior going on, that's for sure, and that needs to be addressed. But equally important is the fact that there is a victim, that there was abusive behavior going on. And if there's abuse, there is a victim. I'm the perpetrator, there is a victim. The victim needs attention because abuse has taken place. Now, some of my clients that come to me for coaching, they don't understand how they could be characterized as an abuser. And we have a tendency to minimize our behavior. And so some of the men will say, it was just porn. I mean, why is she so upset? And why is she throwing around the abuse word? Most guys look at porn. I mean, yeah, it was secretive, but I never acted out with another person. And part of that minimization is thinking that this is not technically abuse. But here's the problem. For most of these relationships, if you were looking at porn and it was secret and it was deceptive and your partner did not know about it, and you're in an intimate relationship, there is an understood implicit agreement that you will not engage in behaviors like that this will be an exclusive, monogamous, committed relationship. And so it constitutes abusive behavior. Even if it does not qualify as an addiction, it is still harmful. It is still abusive. So here's the problem. Pornography use in a relationship is rarely done in isolation. There is usually a broader pattern of deception, of gaslighting, of lying. Often there are financial secrets involved with the porn consumption. There is manipulation. According to Dr. Skinner, 90% of sex addicts, once they are discovered, engage in blame shifting in one way or the other. They somehow shift the blame to their partner, that it's their fault, which is incredibly damaging and abusive. So pornography in and of it, some men will argue, how is this abusive? But it wasn't done in isolation. If there was deception involved, then as soon as you add the element of deception, there is also abuse going on towards the intimate partner. When we solely focus on the term addiction and we don't add the word abuse, now the emphasis tends to be on the addict, the individual struggling with their compulsive behavior. However, when we acknowledge that both are going on, now the perspective shifts towards, okay, if there's abuse, then there's a victim. There's been an impact on the partner. We need to acknowledge and validate their pain, their reality, the unique form of trauma that they're going through, and the violation of trust and the reality that they thought that they. If you notice in our culture, is very common for celebrities when they get caught in some kind of deceptive sexual scandal, they will use a common tactic of declaring themselves to be, quote, sex addicts, and they'll admit themselves into rehab. Often this is done by the advice of their counsel, their lawyer. And you have to question those tactics. Is this a genuine attempt at self-improvement? Or do you really recognize that you were involved in compulsive sexuality? Or are you doing this as a measure of garnering sympathy, avoiding accountability, and trying to maintain your public image? A great case study of this would be Harvey Weinstein. Harvey, as you know, had many women who were accusing him of sexual assault, of harassment. And so his legal team came up with this idea that a lot of celebrities do. We're going to claim that you're a sex addict. And that will shift the focus off of all of these victims, and people will start to focus on your own internal struggle. You've got this horrible, debilitating disease called sex addiction. And so you couldn't quite control yourself because the disease took over and it was leading you to do these things. The common perception of the word addiction is that the person with the addiction, with this disease, is often themselves a helpless victim, and they've been stripped of their agency and their free will. And we tend to have a little bit more sympathy for someone who wears that label. So if I tell you a story about someone who goes and does horribly destructive things, they steal a car, they vandalize a home, they rob a store, they do all these horrible things, and you're getting this impression of who this person is and their character, and it's getting more and more negative. But then I throw in the caveat that they've got an addiction. Then we kind of tone down our negative perception of that person. And often we'll begin to think, oh, okay, well, that explains it. And now we don't think about the owner of the car that was stolen. And we don't think about the owners of the residence that was scandalized. And we don't think about the shop owner who was robbed. We think about this poor individual who's having the struggle with their addiction, and we need to get them some help. But do you see what happens? The shift focuses from the perpetrator and shifts away from the victims of what the perpetrator did. A lot of times, when betrayed partners will come to us and they're seeking support, one of the main questions they have, and they want to come up with a diagnosis, does my partner have a sex addiction? And the thought that we have around that is maybe they do, maybe they don't. That's debatable. Does it really change anything for you if they do or they don't? Because here is what is rock solid. Here's what we know for sure, and here's what you as a betrayed partner need to focus on. This is abuse. Do you get that? Do you embrace that? That you have been harmed, terribly harmed. And you need to pursue safety. You need to pursue your own health and well-being. And yes, maybe he is an addict, maybe he's not, but let's be really clear right here. This constitutes abuse. You are not responsible for their behavior, but you deserve to be treated with dignity. You deserve the truth. You deserve to be treated with respect. When we primarily focus on the quote-unquote addiction, then the shift now primarily focuses on the addict's journey. And so we'll see partners begin to manage their recovery. And we need to see that for what it really is. When a partner begins to quote unquote manage the recovery of the addict that they're in a relationship with, here's what's really going on. They are pursuing safety and they're hoping they get the truth. So what they're thinking in the midst of this trauma and shock, they're thinking, okay, does he have an addiction? If he does, maybe if he goes through the 12 steps, maybe if he goes to this residential treatment program, maybe if he gets the right sponsor, maybe if we get a therapist, maybe if we find the right modality and the right treatment and the right people around him, maybe he'll stop abusing me. Maybe he will be faithful to me, and maybe he'll finally give me the truth of what he really did, 100% of what he really did. Here's the problem with that. We have now shifted the focus to the addict. Here's what happens. We shift the focus to the well-being, the health, the wellness of the perpetrator. And now we're no longer focusing on the victim and their safety and them getting the truth and their well-being. So when a betrayed partner is trying to manage the recovery of the addict, what they're really trying to do is the two things they most desperately need. They're trying to find safety and they're trying to find the truth. Safety, so they can begin the healing process. Truth, so that they can organize this chaos and they understand, what am I healing from exactly? Now, some betrayed partners will, out of fear and betrayal trauma and shock, they'll say, but what if I lose the relationship? What if we don't treat this addiction, if that doesn't become the focus, I could lose the relationship. So let's be really clear here. The worst case scenario, the absolute worst case scenario, is not you losing the relationship. It's the reality that you're living in right now. This is abuse. It's got to stop. You can't control his behavior. You can't manage his recovery. He may or may not get well. That's out of your control. But let's focus on you. Let's get you safe. Let's try to get you the truth, but if he won't give you the truth, let's still focus on your healing, your wellness, whether this is an addiction or not, whether he gets his act together or not. You've got to shift the focus on you and having a care plan for you. That's why we strongly advocate for the Minwalla model developed by Dr. Omar Minwalla. And you'll see a link to it in our show notes. But what we appreciate about his model is he doesn't even use the word addiction. You won't find the word addict in his model. What he says is deceptive sexuality, if it's in the environment of an intimate relationship, deceptive sexuality is a core problem that has two parts. There is compulsive, entitled sexual behavior going on, but there is also intimacy abuse going on. And he goes on to list 47 different types of abusive behaviors that are common when there is compulsive, entitled sexual behavior in the midst of deceptive sexuality in a relationship. So this one core problem that has two parts leads to one bigger problem, and that is betrayal trauma for the partner and the family. That's why in our coaching practice, the foundation of it is the Minwalla model. We don't just focus on the quote-unquote addictive behaviors, but we also focus on the abusive behaviors. So the men that I work with, if they're in a relationship, we're going to focus on both. We've got to take care of both. We've got to stop the addictive behaviors and understand what are the thought processes, what are the cognitive constructs behind that, so that you never go back to that. But we also have to address the fact that you have been engaging in an operation of abuse towards your partner. And it's been going on as long as you've been engaging in this. And both have to stop. So if you look at the show notes, you'll see a link to our website where we have additional resources, we have articles, we have videos, we have podcasts, and we have coaching where we focus on this exact thing. Not just addressing the addictive behavior, but addressing the abusive behavior. And for betrayed partners, finding hope, healing, safety, and the truth for them. We'll see you next time. Thanks.